It's not working now. There we go. All right, we're live. Thank you, Christina, for joining us today. It's the third Thursday of July already. I can't believe it. It went from January to July in like 2 minutes.
Yes.
But so happy to connect with you. I think you have a lot of valuable things to share with our churches, as lots of them are talking about this whole, I don't want to say buzzword of intergenerational ministry, but really this whole concept of it, as we know some of the reasons why our students leave the church and don't come back is their disconnect to it when they kind of get dumped into the congregation. And so if we kind of approach that from a different way, with intergenerational ministry, we could kind of change that from happening. So first, just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, ReFocus Ministry, what that's all about, and love to hear that.
Yeah. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Christina Embree, and I'm the founder and director of ReFocus Ministry. So my journey to get to ReFocus and to get to this idea of intergenerational ministry actually started in 2010. And I was asked by my pastor at the time to consider becoming the family and children's ministry director. And I was like, I have a degree in secondary education. I teach seniors and juniors. I'm not sure this is the right call for me. But he encouraged me. He said, I really think they're going to find that you're going to end up working more with adults than you realize. You're going to work with volunteers. You're going to work with parents. You're going to work with the rest of staff. And you probably won't be around kids as much as you think you're going to be. And so I prayed about it. I felt like the Lord said, do it. But I had asked him, hey, if I do this thing, can I at least go to a conference and get some kind of training? And so I did. I went to, at that time, Group Publishing had a conference called Kidmin. And I went to that, and I happened to stumble upon a breakout with someone named Brian Haynes, and he had written a book called Shift, which was about moving our focus from children's ministry being the greatest hour of the Sunday to actually equipping parents at home to do the work of discipleship. And we all know that kind of took off, like that idea of parents and family discipleship. And I bought into it, and I went back to my church, and I was all fired up. And I found out that my parents really struggled with what I was sharing with them. My parents and caregivers, they had not grown up talking a lot about faith in the home and having those kinds of experiences. That was kind of a church thing. And they felt kind of overwhelmed and at the same time alone. They didn't really have like a community that was surrounding them as they were kind of doing this work. And so the more I looked at how I could strengthen the home and the discipleship and faith formation that was happening in the home, I realized it had to be more than me, and it had to be more than handouts that I handed to them that oftentimes ended up in the trash. It had to be more than resources. There had to be a community that surrounded these families, that came around these parents, that were mentors to the caregivers. And so I started looking into how do I connect the church, as a whole together in this process of discipleship. And that led me down the path to what we call intergenerational ministry. And you're right, it has become a little bit of a buzzword. It was not when I first started writing in 2014 about it. When I first started my work, I've done a master's and a doctorate. And both of those I've focused in on this idea of connecting generations. And at that time, it wasn't. It's become a buzzword. There's been more research done by more popular organizations like Fuller Youth Institute and Barna and Pew. They're showing the importance of these intergenerational relationships. So the word's getting out there. So now I'm pulling back from the word a little bit because I just want people to understand that this is not about a buzzword, but this is about a way of doing church and generational discipleship that is integral to us passing our faith from one generation to another. And so I like to use the term all age, all stage, because that's what we're talking about in my estimation, is we are creating a church that's for all age, all stage, and bringing them together. So once I completed my doctorate, ReFocus went from a blog to a not-for-profit, and now we work with churches all over the globe, helping them to carry out our mission, which is to connect generations in meaningful relationships for lifelong discipleship.
I love that. And so could you give us your kind of definition of intergenerational ministry? Like and kind of the why behind it, like what it is, and then the why behind it. Like, what has your research shown?
Yeah. So I pulled up a definition that I wrote years ago just so that I could have a definition for this. And this is the definition I had. It's ministry that focuses on connecting multiple generations in faith-forming relationships cultivated through times of corporate worship, intentional discipleship, and ongoing mentorship. And that's a really fun definition, and I like it. However, I'm going to just go back to what we have as our mission at ReFocus, which is connecting generations in meaningful relationships for lifelong discipleship. And the reason I like that as a definition for intergenerational ministry is because it's all encompassing. A lot of times when we hear intergenerational ministry, the first thing people think is, let's put everybody in church on Sunday morning, put kids in the pews, put youth on the worship team. We've got it. We've got intergenerational ministry. But intergenerational ministry is not about putting a lot of people together in the same space. That's the first part, connecting generations. But it has to go further than that, in meaningful relationships. We are looking to help build relationships between the generations for a reason, not just so they can be besties and enjoy coffee at Starbucks. For lifelong discipleship, we are cultivating a space where we are expecting and hoping that what God has taught older generations, and that might be a 20-year-old if they're hanging out with a 14-year-old, what they have taught, what God has taught us is being passed on. Our faith stories are being told, our little nuggets of wisdom, our legacy of love, the way that we serve, mentoring, all of that is happening. So that to me is intergenerational ministry. It's much more holistic, and it involves a finalized purpose, which is to help us know Jesus and follow Jesus better.
Yeah, and I think as you were saying that, the Old Testament comes to mind. It's biblical. I mean, that's how they did it in the past. And that's why I think we got to where we are, maybe not right now, but years ago, the way that things kind of were set up. Yes. And so your research, what are the benefits that you have seen from intergenerational ministries as you work with churches?
Yeah, it's so funny. Yesterday, I was actually just sitting next to my husband and I was on social media, and I came across this random post from, I don't even know, it's like something I would never have expected to see anything about intergenerational relationships on. It was a picture of Selena Gomez and Meryl Streep. And it said, underneath it said something about the value of intergenerational relationships. And it was this sociological website that was talking about how important it is for our own mental and physical health for us to be in relationships across generations. So we're not even talking like on a spiritual level here. If we just start with the basic why, it's how we were built. For centuries, generations were together. They worked together. They went to church together. They lived in their little villages together. They all had a purpose and a role to fulfill within that community, but they were together. And it's only recently, over the last 200 years or so, that we've really created what we have as our age-specific areas in our community. So graded schooling became a thing. Instead of one-room schoolhouses, you had separate rooms for each grade, nursing homes, retirement communities, these types of things began to come up. Right now, we're looking at more and more of what are called micro communities, where we see basically that millennial generation kind of coming together and having like all of their gyms and their grocery store and their apartments are above it. And it's all just a little bundle of a micro community. So that's a newer thing. And it happened. I don't know that we really thought through the consequences of it happening, but now studies starting in like the 80s are being done to say, hey, what's going on with us with this? So two main non-religious things that we see is with our younger generations, we see an increasing lack of socialization. And what that means is they don't know how to socialize. They don't know how to go into a workplace and talk to their boomer boss. They don't know how to have a conversation with individuals outside their own very narrow scope. Research is showing us that most people, their friendships and the people that they hang out with tend to be 10 years older or 10 years younger than them. So that creates this very small little bubble that they're moving through life with, where everybody's having the same experiences and the same opinions and the same ideas, and they don't know how to talk to people outside of that. So that's what we see with the younger generations. With the older generations, we're seeing, and you can read about this all over the place, an ongoing epidemic of loneliness and isolation that is actually leading to earlier death, because our physical health is connected to our ability to connect with others. And when that goes away, we see loneliness and isolation taking place, and they go down. And if you look at developmental theorists, they will tell you that it can't just be, again, that those people that are the same age, especially when you're older, because part of what's important for us when we're older, as we're developing our development and to be healthy mentally, is that we have a way to leave a legacy, to have our wisdom validated, to tell our stories. And so compounding on the fact that there's this loneliness and isolation, the inability to share those things to future generations. So from a very physical, mental, psychological standpoint, those are some issues. From a biblical standpoint, the research that we see coming out is telling us that warm intergenerational relationships, I'm using the terminology that comes from Fuller Youth Institute and their book, Growing Young. Warm intergenerational relationships is one of the keys of helping youth and young adults to have mature faith and remain connected to the church. That doesn't mean that they maybe go to your church for the rest of their life, but they stay connected to the church, to their faith, and they have a mature faith, which is something we hadn't really looked at before when we talked about it, but maturing faith. And we see that being backed up by research that was done with Awana and Barna 2 years ago, talking about the importance of children being connected to multiple adults within the church community. We see that backed up with research that came out of Springtide research, which talks about how actually these younger generations tend to be more spiritual than previous generations, but less connected to any kind of a faith tradition or a faith community. So all of this tells me, on one hand, physically, mentally, socially, we need each other. But on the faith side of things, this is how our faith gets passed on in community between multiple generations.
Yeah, that's really great. I can definitely relate having two boys that are 23 and 18 with the whole social part of it. And we've had to be very, very intentional to make it so that when they get in a room with adults, they can have a conversation with them. But I feel like that's huge right now. I mean, it's awful. They don't even want to pick up the phone and make a phone call to anybody.
And they're not alone.
Yeah, sure.
That is, I actually sat on a plane coming back from somewhere, and this random guy sat down next to me. We started talking. It turns out that he trains new and upcoming park rangers. And he found out what I do, and he was like, I got to ask you a question. I can't get these new park rangers to sit down with me in a meeting. They want to text me. They want to meet over Zoom. But to actually come and sit with me and have a conversation, I can't get them to show up. What's going on? And I was like, well, they don't know how to talk to you. Even when they were in school, if they had a problem with an assignment, they would say to the teacher, hey, I need help. And the teacher would say, contact me on the app. I'll show you what to do. Right. So there's this barrier between generations that's having an impact. And then if we bring that into the church, we can't ignore it. It's compounded because we're adding our faith and the passing of our faith onto that.
Yeah, that's big. And I think that as people hear you, they will say, yes, I totally agree with everything. So what are some things as far as in the church? Like you mentioned, it's not just putting the youth on the praise team. It's not just having them sit in church on Sunday morning next to each other. It goes beyond that into relationships. And so how does a church start to formulate that kind of culture within the church? Because we often hear a lot of times too, as soon as the kids ministry leader speaks up about, helping in the kids ministry, the adults are kind of like, our kids are grown and we've already done that. We've done our time. And so what does that look like in the local church?
Yeah. Well, this is the first thing I have to say. And it sounds like a cop-out, but it's not. Every church is very different. Every community is very different. I don't think that there is a cookie cutter answer to the question you just asked, because everybody is different. And you actually asked several questions in there. So I might say a couple of things here, if that's okay. Regarding how children, like when the children's pastor is asking for volunteers, I know what that feels like. When I was in the children's role, I would be walking down a hallway and people would like go and hide. Even if I wasn't going to ask them, they were like, she's going to ask me to help.
Well, they don't answer your phone call. And
right. And so I totally understand that. And it may not be helpful to hear this, but actually those connections that happen within the classroom with the volunteers, they have not actually been shown to bring about the kind of faith formation that we are talking about. And that is simply because the children see those people as workers who have to be there. It's just like when you say to your daughter or your son, oh my goodness, you just look so handsome, you look so beautiful. And they say, you have to say that, you're my mom. Mm-hmm. For whatever, there's like this disconnect. So it's not like I'm saying you shouldn't have multiple volunteers of multiple generations involved. But what we want to do, that's the connect. We want to take it to that next level and say, now, how do we develop a relationship? Because that's where we see the things happening. And I know that we've all experienced that in church. I think about this one older gentleman when I was growing up who always had Werthers. And it became like a thing, but you had to go and have a conversation with him if you wanted your Werthers, right? Like you had to go and he would ask you how school was doing and you would have a conversation with him. And he'd usually try to drop a nugget or two of wisdom in there before you got your piece of candy. He had taken it that next step, right? Like to develop a relationship with the kids. He knew their names. The parents knew he had the candy and they had this whole like relationship with him. That's what we were trying to capitalize on. How do we do that? Well, the first thing I think we need to do in our churches is to step back and assess, where are we? Where are there bridges? Where are there places we are already connecting? Maybe there's like, I'm working with a church right now that I love it. They do this thing every month called Coffee and. It's just like the ampersand. So they have a big coffee hour and there's usually desserts and they call it Coffee and everybody goes there. It is definitely a place of connection, but they are not forming relationships out of that space. So I'm working with them to help figure out, how do we take this place of connection, this bridge, and build it stronger? And every church has bridges. We all have places where we all are located. Now, how do we move it past hello in the hallway to let's get a cup of coffee? How do we help generations to do that? And it doesn't have to be kids and adults. I mean, we're just talking, it could be a 40-year-old and a 70-year-old. That's intergenerational. We're just connecting generations, right? And then another thing the church has to assess is, where are our barriers? Where is there absolutely no opportunity for connection happening? Where are we so siloed out from one another that we don't even have the chance to connect, let alone start a relationship? And for some churches, that's actually Sunday morning. The kids aren't there, the youth aren't there. It's a very small group, like a targeted group of people that met. Kids get dropped off, youth go to youth group, and then you've just got the older generations all together. That's going to limit how much you're able to build relationships between youth, and you're going to have to find another place for that connection to happen. So identifying bridges, identifying barriers, build the bridges, start looking at how can we tear down the barriers. And then the last question is like, how do you build that culture? It takes a lot of time. Whenever I coach with churches, I tell them we are changing culture. That's a 3 to 5 year thing. This is not something you can program in. There's a whole mindset change that has to happen there, with an understanding of why we're doing this. Why are we connecting? Why are we putting each other into relationships? So I do have like 2 specific places I think churches can start that I think are easy starts. But I think any church can do it, but it takes time. Yeah. So the first place I think any church can start is with prayer. We can all pray. I don't care how young you are or how old you are. And a church connected in intercessory prayer becomes a more fertile and ground for building relationships. I personally am a huge fan of the Pray For Me campaign, which is through Tony Souter. And he has a book and he has a whole program. So you don't have to change your schedule at all. You just follow what it has. And each youth and child in the church gets connected to 3 adults in the church who will pray for them. And if you strategize, you can make it where you can get a total of 4 generations connected in prayer for one another. That's huge. I've had so many churches that have started that come back to me later and been like, it changed everything.
Oh, wow.
Praying for one another is huge. The second way is through serving together. If you can find a place where multiple generations can serve together, community gardens, food banks or food kitchens, different kinds of drives, like we did a Sock It To Me drive where we collected socks that we gave to a local homeless shelter. Anything where multiple generations can safely participate and older generations can mentor younger generations. I've been doing it for a while. I'm going to show you how to do it. Those types of things. Those 2 things, prayer and service, can lay foundations for bridges that allow for relationships to be grown. And it also says we're all in this together. We're all on one mission. We're in it together. We're part of one church. We're connected. And it can really begin to help create that culture of, well, there's not ages here. We're just all part of this church. And we're working together for this thing. We're praying for one another because we love each other.
Right. And I think it also helps with those kids or students or even just young people taking ownership in the church. So many times I feel like people come into church and it's a service that they go to, like literally a service, like they're getting served and then they leave. But this kind of makes it feel like this is our home. This is where we do life together, arm in arm. Everything we do is arm in arm together, which is going to lead to that ownership of this is my church. But like you said, too, we also have the reality that students go to college and go away and move away and things like that. And so it may not be that they live their tenure out, their spiritual tenure out at our church, but that they are thriving when they leave our church to find another church to get plugged into. That's another disconnect we see of when kids who don't feel like a part of the church and then they leave for college and they feel like that part of their life is over. Like, I'm done with youth ministry and I'm in college, I'm an adult now, and they end up not going to church or doing anything. So I think that has a lot of benefits there.
But imagine with me if this were to happen. Imagine if there was a child in your church who at 6 years old got connected to 3 prayer partners, and they kept those 3 prayer partners throughout school. And those prayer partners didn't only just pray for them, but they showed up at that kid's games and went to his birthday parties and was at his graduation. And then when that same child goes off to college, sends him letters and care packages. And whenever he's home on the weekend, says, hey, you want to get a cup of coffee? I want to hear about college. And even if that child ends up graduating and not coming back to the church, the chance of that child graduating, having a mature faith, and going to another church in the future is so much higher. And that's what we're talking about. And the way that Sticky Faith put it, they said they were looking for what they called the silver bullet, the one thing that would like make kids stay in church. And they didn't find one, but they said the closest thing that they found was intergenerational relationships, the opportunity to worship intergenerationally and to know the names of people in your church and to have them know you and care about you. So I do think there's some flip scripting that can happen. We can flip some scripts if we are willing to be consistent in this message of we are a community of faith and we are going to do this thing together. Basically, when we do a baby dedication, there's typically a time where the congregation commits to that child and says, we will walk with you and help you to know God, and we will support your parents. It's living that out, not just having it as part of a worship service that we do once, but living it out as that child grows and as that youth is in school and through college.
No, that's good. That's really good. And it's funny you say kind of flip the script. I know that Lifeway actually came out with a book called Flip the Script. And one of the things they said that led to kind of that lifelong ownership in church attendance is having caring adults, relationships with caring adults in the church. So it's kind of everywhere. It's a fact by several different research companies that say this is it. And it's so much more like what you said than a curriculum, an event, so much more than, I think sometimes we look to those things because we feel like that's an easy answer. But sometimes the answer isn't something that costs a lot of money. It isn't something that costs a whole lot of volunteers to pull off. And so just thinking a little bit differently. And I love how you mentioned like the first step is kind of pulling back and assessing kind of where you are, where are your bridges and where are your barriers. And to that point, tell us a little bit about just ReFocus Ministry, what you do. I know that you do some cohorts and things like that you walk to churches, you have that kind of assessment available. So tell us just a little bit more about how you can work with churches individually, specifically.
Yeah. And I always say to churches that ask me about this stuff, like, you don't have to use ReFocus Ministry, but I highly recommend you find someone who's a coach or has this kind of education, not because I don't think churches can just do it, but because it is very normal in our society. And it is in all the resources, for the most part, that we have, normalize doing things not together. They normalize age graded, they normalize age specific. That's the normal way of thinking. So you almost have to get somebody who has stepped outside of that and has reformulated their mind to see connections and to see differences. So I highly recommend, if this is something that you are interested in, there are organizations out there that help churches to do this very thing. And one of them is ReFocus. Like I said, our mission is connecting generations and meaningful relationships for lifelong discipleship. We do that through a number of ways. We do consulting and coaching specifically with churches and denominations. We have cohorts that we run every quarter. We're currently filling up our fall cohort. Well, we've got 2 because we had enough people interested to do 2. And our cohorts go really deep on everything I just brushed the surface of today. Theological foundations, biblical foundations. We talk about developmental theory and how that fits into this whole thing. And then we actually go through an assessment of that faith community, whatever faith community you're representing, and you get follow-up coaching for a year to address these bridges and barriers. And then we do offer, as a one-off, we have our Connect Generations Ministry assessment tool that actually helps you to go through different structures within your church community and to say, we see barriers here, we see bridges here. And you follow up with a 90-minute coaching session with me where we actually pinpoint down for you. Here's 3 bridges that you can focus on. Here are 3 barriers that you can focus on. So you actually have action steps moving forward. And we have a blog, and we have like resources for family faith formation and helping families to connect in the community. One of the things we do is help families understand how to do discipleship at home, but they learn in the church. So it's actually a midweek program where the families all come together, but they are literally practicing discipleship at home with the community. So there's this sense of not doing it alone and not having to figure it out by yourself. So yeah, we offer all of that. And mostly we just want to be available to churches that say, hey, we want to think about this. We want to look into this and offer the resources that they need for their church. Like I said, there's no cookie cutter answer, but there are things we can learn from one another. And so that's what we try to do at ReFocus. And we have a really awesome online
conference coming up just the other day. I was like, wait a minute, what is this? Yeah,
October 23rd. 11 to 4 Eastern time, we are going to have a completely online virtual conference, $15. But if you pay $50, you get all the session recordings, so you can listen to it at your own pace. And I've been putting the breakouts together, and they're going to be amazing. We've got the same speakers that you would get if you went to any number of conferences in person, and we're bringing them online so that it's more accessible to more people. And it's going to be on this bridges and barriers and intergenerational ministry. But we're talking everything from how we do trauma-informed intergenerational ministry and care, all the way up to how do you start from the ground and work your way up. So we've got a lot. I'm really excited about it.
Oh, good. I know I saw that and I was like, oh, this is great. So what I will probably do, and I will put it in the comments, I'm going to put some of the books you mentioned in the comments. Yes. Shift by Brian Haynes, Growing Young, and the Pray For Me campaign. I'll put links to that. Of course, links to your website. But probably what I'll do too when I remind people to come watch this is give away a ticket to your conference and the digital membership. So I'll cover that for somebody
Amazing.
watching so that they can take advantage of that. But thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom. I'm so glad that we connected, and looking forward to having some of our churches take advantage of this. One of the phone calls I get most often is, how do we attract new families? We have so many churches that are in need of revitalization. And so I think this is, and one thing they need to understand too is it's not an overnight thing. It's not a program that's going to bring more young families to their church. It's many things, but of which this is a part of.
Yes.
And I think this perspective is a part of revitalization that doesn't take that senior community out of the picture. Correct. And like ask them to move aside and have somebody else come in and kind of take over. This involves them directly and uses their wisdom and their gifts. And so I love that about that. And I think we would just be a much better big church if big C church, if we kind of took a deep, hard look at this and made some changes in our churches that reflected this. So I thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
So I'm going to put those links in the chat or in the comments after we're finished. But thank you for joining us for our third Thursday conversation. And I will be back next month is August already for another conversation. And I will let our people know who that is in the next couple of weeks. So, but thank you so much, Christina.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. All right. Okay. I think we